we have an early fight of the year candidate, guys, as Usman Nurmagomedov got a scare from Paul Hughes in his second title defense of his Bellator lightweight title. Let's give these guys their flowers. Nolan, how about a reaction to this fight? And did you have the score in favor of Nurmagomedov as well?
Yeah, I did. I think it was a great fight. I mean, it was exactly the way that PFL, I think, wants to kick off this new era, right? There's been a lot of talk. There's been a lot of negativity. There's been a lot of criticism. And so for them to come in and the rest of the card, I'm sure we'll talk about, it was maybe a little bit lackluster, kind of stuck in that just kind of repeated nature of decisions and maybe some unfamiliar names. But when it came time for the two guys at the top of this billing that was described as two of the best lightweights in the world, two of the best fighters outside the UFC. All the things you hear from promotions that go up against the UFC, right? Like, look at these guys, they're legit. Those two guys are super legit, man. They showed some high-level stuff in there. A very fun fight to watch, a fight of the year candidate. I think PFL checked a lot of boxes there. It seemed to get a lot of attention. People were talking about it. I think the fact that it was such a close fight got people a little, going. And I think that's the sort of conversations that are really good for a promotion when people are getting invested that way. So I think they nailed it, knocked it out of the park with this main event. And it goes to show you, right, when you move away from the tournament format, when you focus on making the best fights possible, these sort of matchups can happen. And so I give PFL credit for booking this fight right off the bat to kind of kick things off for their 2025 calendar. Just really great stuff.
Mike Bond, what were your thoughts on this title defense for Nurmi? Excuse me.
Yeah, it was a great fight, man. Like Usman has been able to cruise in a lot of these fights and not really be pushed out of first or second gear, and that was not the case here. Paul Hughes had an incredible game plan. His team scouted these guys really well, and it's kind of crazy. Almost saw two Nurmagomedovs lose their undefeated records within a week of each other. But two great fights, right? Like, for anyone says these guys are just, lay and pray artists or crotch sniffers or whatever, I think the past 2 weekends have really proven otherwise, that they are, can put on incredible high level fights. Both of those are, for us, fight of the month nominees, might stick up as fight of the year. We'll see. But yeah, I thought it was the right decision. I would have been very okay if they had went to a draw here, 48-40 or 47-47 with the point deduction. But if you're not going to go that way and give Hughes, I think it would have been a 10-8 in the third. I think giving it 48-46 for Nurmagomedov is a palatable score here. It definitely sets up a rematch, and PFL, as Nolan kind of said, really needed a fight like this. Like, I've said this a few times towards the tail end of last year where the criticism was really coming on hard. It's like, if the fights deliver, it can really pull them out of the slump, but they didn't have those big moments like the Francis Ngannou Ferreira fight. It was fine. It ended in the finish, but it wasn't like, the greatest thing that we're all talking about like we are this. So they needed a fight like this. You could make an argument it's the best fight in PFL history, given like the stakes, the standing, the quality of the fighters. Maybe that like Lewis McGrillen fight last year that had 13 knockdowns or whatever is like the better fight in terms of just like crazy wild action. But for being very high level, this was spectacular what they needed. I think it was the rightful winner, but definitely sets up a rematch. And as I'm sure we'll get into, what is the path to that rematch is the big question now.
And Danny, PFL can boast. They had ranked fighters competing. It was compelling. They had a pretty decent crowd there. I mean, they dimmed the lights, so I can't tell. I don't want to clown, but at the same time, it sounded pretty loud. But what were your thoughts on this main event?
Yeah, it was great. I agree a lot with Nolan. Like, these are the type of fights that they have the ability to put on, and they should use the matchmaking format to make more of these fights, because these are the type of fights that are going to elevate the promotion. Clearly, this was a high-level fight. I mean, anybody watching that knows that these two were top-notch talents, and they could easily compete in the UFC. And that's what you want to see, right? Like, that's the type of level that you want to see of fighting, especially on a weekend where there is no UFC event. So I think this was a great result for the PFL. I think they need more of this. And yeah, the fight was extremely competitive. I really enjoyed it. And it was a very, very difficult fight to judge. I've only watched it once. I will have to watch it again, but I'm still having a tough time kind of deciphering who really was the winner. I mean, I can tell you for the first two rounds, I feel comfortable judging that fight. First round, giving it to Usman, and second to Hughes. But then after that, it gets weird. It gets a little weird. So yeah, it's a very compelling fight, and I'm pretty sure these two will meet again.
Mike, even the judges were in disagreement. The Vegas-based judges, Cologne, was one of them, and I think the other one was Sal D'Amato. But
It was.
yeah, so even the judges were, not in line, and some were two over here and one over here. I mean, it looked like it was close rounds, but I think what made everyone react the way they did is because Hughes came on strong with those two switches. The shots to the body added up, and then it looked like, I wouldn't say he was about to put him out, but it looked like a couple more onslaughts, and Usman was dwindling. My question to you is, immediate rematch? What do you do with these guys?
It's tricky, right? Because Usman said this statement in the post-fight interview, which got a lot of traction, right? Him saying he'll fight him again, but he needs to win 3 or 4 fights before, which is like, seems a little crazy when you look at the lightweight roster. It's all going to come down to timing. I don't have an objection with the idea of Paul Hughes having to win 1 fight in between this, right? Like, he did get pretty fast tracked to the title shot, as did Usman when he got his title shot, to be fair, coming into Bellator. But I think the best way to promote this is not Paul Hughes coming off a loss. And if he loses again, right, it's a tricky situation. Then he's on back-to-back defeats. And then where do you really go? And then Paul Hughes did say post-fight he wants back in there very soon, as soon as he can. And then Usman says, I want a little time off after 3 title defenses in 15 months. So I could see maybe Paul fighting once, winning one, and then getting the rematch. So maybe his next fight isn't the rematch, but maybe Usman's is, right? So the timing could line up with that. But if you're PFL, I think you definitely got to try to put this together sooner than later, because Usman did sign a new 2-year contract going into this fight, which I believe is for 4 fights. So if he's sitting here saying Paul Hughes needs to fight 3-4 more times, where does the timing line up? It could line up right with when Usman's contract exits, and then maybe he's gone from the company. So I think you need to kind of force his hand to make that happen a little sooner, because PFL does need to make this rematch. And I do think once the deal is up, Usman is going to try to make his way to the UFC. And maybe by that point, Islam Makhachev is a welterweight or something beyond. So I think this is all kind of an orchestrated plan between that team. And if you're PFL, your priority is to make that rematch while Usman is still around.
In our chat, which you can come to us via Facebook and YouTube, Joseph Boza says, felt like to me, Usman was very lucky. Like he was awarded one because Team Khabib couldn't afford 2 losses in a row. And as was pointed out earlier, his brother Umar.
You think that's what the judges are thinking? They're thinking about, like, oh, Umar lost, we can't give him this decision against Usman here. I don't know. I think Paul Hughes had just an exceptional performance. Usman said he underestimated him as well. So take that for what you will. And this was just a weird fight too, man. Like, all the fouls that happened early on, Usman definitely got the worst of that head clash in round 4 that led to the break in the action. I know Paul was cut open, but he seemed to get the greater momentum from it in terms of like a, impact perspective. So how hurt was he from that? How did he kind of impact him in the 4th and 5th round? So yeah, just like not the cleanest fight, not the, just a lot of stuff that interrupted the flow of the action. I think that hurt both guys from putting on their best performance.
Yeah, it was a great fight, man. Oatmeal26 says Jeremy Stevens beats both their asses. We'll get to Jeremy Stevens. He did have a big weekend as well, but keep the comments coming here, folks. I think a lot of us would like to see a rematch, maybe not immediate, and maybe that's the payoff. Hey, you win one, we'll do it in Belfast. We'll see. Danny Segura, I do want to ask you, where does Usman Nurmagomedov rank to you off the top of your head? Where would you slot him when you're ranking all lightweights?
Yeah, very, very tough one. I think before this, I probably would have ranked him higher, even though it's another title defense, another victory. But I feel like Paul Hughes kind of made him look a bit more human than we ever have. I still say he's like a top 10 talent. And remember, he's still young. He's still learning, but certainly among the top 10 in the world. I'd be a little bit hesitant to throw him in the top 5. Like, how would he fare against a Charles Oliveira or a Dustin Poirier that can put on, a lot of pressure on him and a lot of damage, a lot more than Paul Hughes. That certainly gets interesting, but yeah, he's one of the world's best for sure. At least I would feel comfortable, like top 7 maybe in the world.
Yeah, he's actually number 6 in the USA Today MMA Junkie rankings, but that's without weighing the consideration of this fight. So maybe he moves to 5. We'll see. I mean, he's 19-0. He's got title defenses now, and you can connect the dots a little bit. Beating AJ McKee is pretty legit for Paul Hughes, and then representing well in a title fight. Now we kind of know where Paul Hughes' definitely didn't get lucky to get in that position.